Welcome back. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a journey into the darkest corners of family secrets and shattered trust. A newborn that defies all explanation. A truth that someone desperately tried to hide. Brace yourself for twists that will shake you to your core and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Stay with me, this is a story you won't forget. There's something unsettling about a quiet neighborhood when secrets linger just beneath the surface, things that nobody talks about but everyone senses. And in one seemingly ordinary suburb where the streets were lined with picket fences and freshly mowed lawns, a mystery was quietly unfolding that would shake a family to its core. Meet Sarah and James Miller, an unassuming couple in their mid-30s, married for 5 years and eagerly awaiting the arrival of their first child. They were the kind of couple everyone envied, kind, responsible, and deeply in love. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. The house was immaculate, the lawn freshly trimmed, and their smiles warm and genuine. Friends called them the perfect pair. But then something happened that no one could have expected, something so strange it turned their world upside down. The baby was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. Sarah had gone through a long and difficult labor, but when the doctor finally handed her the newborn, a wave of shock washed over her. Because the child, tiny and fragile, had features that looked nothing like either parent. The baby's skin tone, eyes, even the shape of the nose and lips were different. James held his son gently, searching for a familiar spark in his dark eyes, but found none. The baby's hair was thick and black, unlike Sarah's soft blonde locks or James' chestnut brown. It was a jarring contrast so stark it raised unspoken questions in the room. Sarah's heart sank, her mind racing with doubt and confusion. She looked at James, hoping for reassurance, but his face was pale, frozen in disbelief. The doctor quietly murmured that sometimes babies look different at birth but assured them it would settle with time. But deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. Days turned into weeks. Family and friends came to visit, and the whispers began, subtle, almost hidden behind polite smiles. Some stared longer than necessary. Others exchanged glances when Sarah wasn't looking. The Millers' perfect world started cracking at the edges. Then, one afternoon, a neighbor named Mrs. Reynolds knocked on their door. A woman in her late 60s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see more than she let on. She was known in the neighborhood as someone who knew everyone's business and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. "Mind if I come in?" she asked, stepping inside uninvited but with a tone that left no room for refusal. Sarah hesitated but nodded. Mrs. Reynolds took one look at the baby sleeping peacefully in his crib and her expression changed, just for a moment. Then she cleared her throat and said, "That child, he's not who you think he is." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" she asked, heart pounding. Mrs. Reynolds leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've lived here for nearly 40 years and I've seen many things. That baby, he reminds me of someone else. Someone very close to you." Sarah shook her head, confused and scared. "I don't understand." "His eyes," Mrs. Reynolds said, "they belong to someone you know. Someone who's been watching you." Sarah's mind spun. Who could she trust? What had happened to her baby? And why did no one tell her sooner? As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, the questions only grew heavier. This was no ordinary newborn mystery. It was the beginning of a story about betrayal, secrets, and a past that refused to stay buried. And it all started with a neighbor's whisper. The days that followed Mrs. Reynolds' chilling words felt like a suffocating fog settling over the Millers' once peaceful home. Sarah and James found themselves trapped in a whirlwind of doubt and fear, unable to escape the dark shadow cast by the stranger's warning. At first, Sarah tried to convince herself it was just the imagination running wild. Babies sometimes look different at birth, after all. She clung desperately to that hope as she studied her son's face each day. But every glance revealed features that made her heart ache: the dark almond-shaped eyes, the thick jet black hair that curled softly at the edges, the skin tone that was richer and deeper than either hers or James'. Her husband's face mirrored her confusion. James tried to mask his worry with forced smiles and quiet reassurances, but the weight of the unknown was written clearly in his eyes. Their home, once filled with joyful anticipation and dreams of the future, was now a place of silence and whispered fears. The first cracks appeared in their marriage as small arguments flared up over the most trivial things. Sleepless nights spent pacing the floor, desperate to hold on to the family they had hoped to build. Every moment away from the baby was filled with guilt, every moment near him was tinged with unease. Despite her turmoil, Sarah tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for the sake of their son. She took him to well-child visits and pediatric appointments, always asking the doctors for reassurance. Yet no one could explain why their baby looked so different. Then came the turning point when the call from the hospital's laboratory shattered their last shred of hope. They had hesitated for weeks, reluctant to confirm their fears. But with mounting pressure from friends and family, Sarah and James finally agreed to undergo genetic testing, the kind that would either bind their family together or tear it apart forever. Waiting for the results was agony. Sarah found herself unable to focus on anything, staring at the clock every few minutes, willing time to speed up. When the phone finally rang, her hands trembled so much she almost dropped it. "Mrs. Miller?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional, yet distant. "The genetic analysis is complete. I'm afraid the results confirm that your child is not genetically related to either you or your husband." The words hit her like a thunderclap. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The world spun dizzyingly around her as tears blurred her vision. "How is this possible?" she whispered, barely able to speak. James sat frozen, the color draining from his face. Silence filled the room like a suffocating fog. The doctor explained that while hospital errors are rare, they do happen. Samples can be switched, mistakes made in the labyrinth of medical procedures. Yet the clinical explanation felt hollow, meaningless in the face of the emotional devastation gripping them both. Sarah's mind spiraled back to Mrs. Reynolds' words, to the shadow of a secret lurking somewhere beyond the sterile hospital walls. There had to be more to the story. Desperation gnawed at them. They needed answers, no matter how painful. Sarah began digging into the fragments of her life in the months before her pregnancy. There was one memory she couldn't shake, a man named Daniel, an old childhood friend who had suddenly reappeared in her life. Daniel had shown up unannounced at her workplace, smiling that familiar, charming smile she thought she'd forgotten. He called her several times, leaving messages full of nostalgia and longing. Sarah had told James little about him, brushing it off as a brief reunion with someone from her past. But now, under the crushing weight of uncertainty, those memories twisted into something darker. Meanwhile, James wrestled with his own demons. One evening, Sarah stumbled upon a series of cryptic text messages on his phone, messages from an unknown woman hinting at secrets kept hidden behind closed doors. The timing of those messages, just months before their baby was born, added fuel to the fire of suspicion. Their relationship, once a fortress of trust, was now a battleground. Arguments erupted late into the night, voices raised and tears shed. Each sought solace in silence, but the distance between them grew with every passing day. Sarah felt herself slipping into a void of loneliness and confusion, unsure of who she could trust. The perfect family she had dreamed of seemed to dissolve before her eyes. And then, as if drawn by fate, Mrs. Reynolds appeared again. This time, she brought a box, worn and heavy with the weight of forgotten stories. Inside were old photographs, yellowed letters, and a fragile journal bound in cracked leather. "Read these," Mrs. Reynolds urged, her voice low and urgent. "They tell a story you need to know." As Sarah flipped through the fragile pages, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in chilling clarity. The journal belonged to a woman who had once lived in their house decades before, a woman whose life was marked by scandal and sorrow. The entries spoke of forbidden love, betrayal, and a secret that had been buried for years. Sarah learned that the house itself had witnessed a dark past, one that seemed to ripple through generations. The woman in the journal had connections to people still living in the neighborhood, people who might know more than they were letting on. The photographs showed faces Sarah recognized but couldn't place, a man with eyes eerily similar to her son's, a woman whose smile masked deep pain. As she read on, a story of deception and heartbreak unfolded, linking the past to her present in ways she never imagined. The baby she held was not just a child born in a hospital. He was the living link to a hidden world, a secret kept in silence for decades. Sarah's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that uncovering the truth would come at a cost, but she had no choice. For her child, for her family, she had to face the shadows lurking in the past. The whispers from a neighbor had opened a door. Now Sarah had to walk through it, no matter where it led. And as the sun set over the quiet neighborhood, the Miller's life was about to change forever. The discovery of the old journal, the faded photographs, and the yellowed letters was not just a key, it was a portal to a past Sarah and James had never imagined existed. What began as a desperate search for clarity spiraled into a relentless uncovering of painful secrets, threatening to rip apart the fragile world they had tried so hard to build. Sarah spent countless sleepless nights hunched over the fragile pages, the woman's handwriting fragile yet fierce, telling a story of love, betrayal, and loss that felt eerily connected to her own life. The woman was Margaret, a name whispered with unease by the oldest residents in their neighborhood, a figure wrapped in scandal and silence, her life story long buried but now clawing its way back to the surface. Margaret's journal spoke of a forbidden love, a passionate but doomed affair. Her words revealed not only heartbreak but the existence of a child hidden away from the world, whose very presence was a threat to powerful families, secrets, and long-standing grudges. As Sarah traced Margaret's words, she felt as if the house they lived in wasn't just a home but a silent witness to those hidden histories. James, meanwhile, was battling his own demons. The strain of the unknown had started to erode the trust and warmth between them. The quiet, gentle man Sarah married was now tense and withdrawn, shadows darkening his once bright eyes. Their conversations became fraught with silence and suspicion, and the small, tender moments they once shared were replaced with cold avoidance. One evening, when the weight of silence became unbearable, Sarah confronted James about the mysterious text messages she had found. His guarded walls crumbled. He revealed a hidden chapter of his past. Before their marriage, he had a relationship with a woman who refused to let go. Threats, stalkings, and whispers of revenge haunted him even now. This woman had shadowed his life, lurking in the periphery, and Sarah realized that his past was no longer in the past. Together, they realized the web surrounding their child's origins was tangled with deceit, betrayal, and generations of secrets. Their investigation led them to old family friends who had become estranged, relatives who refused to speak, and neighbors whose smiles masked cold indifference or worse. Harold, an elderly neighbor with weathered skin and eyes that seemed to see into the past, became an unlikely ally. He recounted stories of Margaret's tragic life, tales told in hushed tones and behind closed doors, stories Sarah had never heard. According to Harold, Margaret's child was taken away at birth under mysterious circumstances. The child was absorbed into a foster or adoption system that effectively erased her existence. Over decades, rumors swirled, but no one ever dared to uncover the full truth. Could Sarah's baby be tied to that lost lineage? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Determined to unravel the truth, Sarah and James pored over adoption records, hospital files, and legal documents. Every revelation pulled them deeper into a labyrinth of lies and deception, amazed that someone was desperate to keep hidden. Their quest came at a heavy personal cost. Friends turned their backs, whispering doubts and judgment behind closed doors. Family members distanced themselves, unwilling to become embroiled in the scandal that threatened to engulf them. Sarah's mental health began to crack under the pressure. The roles of mother and detective weighed heavily on her, forcing her to balance the daily joys and exhaustion of raising a child with the harrowing task of unearthing painful truths. James tried to be her anchor, but even his strength was tested by the relentless storm. Then came a breakthrough. A name emerged from the shadows, Claire. A woman who might hold the key to the entire mystery. They arranged to meet in a quiet, dimly lit cafe, their hearts pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Claire introduced herself as Margaret's granddaughter, a woman scarred but resolute who had spent years searching for answers about her grandmother's lost child. She believed Sarah's son could be the child or closely connected. The revelation brought both fear and relief. At last, a thread of truth they could grasp in the chaos. But knowledge came with danger. Unseen eyes watched their every move. Threats, subtle and sinister, began to arrive, warnings to stop digging, reminders that some secrets are better left buried. The Millers' lives became a battleground of shadows and whispers. Every step forward was met with resistance from unseen forces who would do anything to keep the past silent. Sarah gazed down at her son, innocent and unaware of the storm swirling around him. His peaceful sleep was a stark contrast to the turmoil engulfing his family. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope ignited within her. The truth, no matter how painful, was worth the fight. Their story was far from over. The past loomed large and threatening, but together, Sarah and James were determined to shine a light into the darkness, no matter the cost. The air in the room was thick with a tension so palpable it seemed to press down on Sarah and James like a physical weight. After months of uncertainty, endless searching, and the unraveling of secrets, They were finally on the verge of confronting the truth. The meeting with Claire had opened a door, one that led deep into a past soaked with pain, betrayal, and silence. Stepping through it meant they would be forced to face shadows long buried, shadows that refused to remain forgotten. Claire was more than just a link to Margaret. She was the living embodiment of the consequences wrought by secrets kept too long. Her eyes held the kind of sorrow only years of loss and unanswered questions could etch onto a soul. Yet beneath her grief was a fierce determination, a burning need to restore what had been stolen, to find justice for a grandmother's forgotten child. Over countless meetings, hours of conversation, and endless cups of coffee in quiet cafes, Claire unraveled the threads she had spent years tracing. She spoke of hidden wills buried in dusty legal vaults, adoption papers that had vanished from official records, and letters exchanged in whispers between those who dared to remember. Each fragment she revealed was a crack in the wall of deception that had been built to protect a family's reputation. Sarah listened, spellbound and horrified, as Claire detailed the lengths to which this powerful family had gone to bury the past. The child Margaret had given birth to was taken away under mysterious circumstances, erased from all official accounts, and placed in a system designed to silence her existence. For decades, rumors fluttered in the background, stories half told and dismissed. Now, those rumors were colliding with Sarah's own reality. The weight of the possibility that their son was connected to this lost lineage crushed Sarah's chest. This wasn't just about a hospital error or a misplaced baby. This was a legacy, an inheritance of secrets and sacrifices that stretched across generations. James sat beside her, fingers entwined with hers, his gaze fixed but distant. He felt the same storm of emotions, the heavy burden of the past pressing down on their present. They knew their path forward would be perilous. The family Claire spoke of was still powerful, influential, and desperate to keep the past buried. Anyone who dared to pry risked devastating consequences. Determined, they began to gather evidence with meticulous care. Private investigators were hired to dig into sealed court records and obscure legal documents. They combed through hospital files, adoption agency paperwork, and old news articles that had long faded from memory. The deeper they dug, the more resistance they met. Phone calls from unknown numbers, subtle threats whispered in the dark, and warnings disguised as concerned advice tried to halt their progress. But Sarah's resolve was unshakable. Every obstacle hardened her determination to protect her son and to bring light to a story cloaked in darkness. Their personal lives frayed under the strain. Friends withdrew, their glances turning cold, whispers of doubt trailing behind them. Family members, fearful of scandal, distanced themselves, leaving Sarah and James isolated in their fight. The emotional toll was crushing. Sarah found herself battling anxiety, the relentless pressure threatening to overwhelm her. Motherhood's joys were shadowed by the constant dread of what lay beneath the surface. James struggled to be her rock, but even his strength was tested by the relentless storm around them. And then, in the midst of their darkest days, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former employee of the adoption agency stepped forward with documents, detailed records proving the existence of an illegal adoption ring operating decades ago. This ring, as the documents revealed, had orchestrated the disappearance of Margaret's child and countless others, erasing their origins to protect influential families. Armed with this damning evidence, Sarah and James confronted the family at the center of the scandal. The confrontation was tense, raw, and filled with painful revelations. Long-buried resentments surfaced, and truths twisted by years of lies finally emerged in harsh light. The family's representatives, once untouchable and aloof, faced the consequences of their actions. Apologies were spoken, grudges aired, and wounds tentatively tended. While not all was resolved, a measure of justice was finally within reach. For Sarah, the journey had become more than uncovering secrets. It was about reclaiming identity, restoring dignity, and forging a future where her son could grow free of shadows. As the dust settled, Sarah and James embraced the uncertain but hopeful path ahead. They chose to share their story publicly, lending voice to the lost and silenced, and standing as a beacon to ensure no child would be erased again. The community, once fractured by suspicion, slowly rallied around the Millers, inspired by their courage and resilience. Their struggle became a catalyst for change, sparking conversations about justice, transparency, and the power of truth. One quiet evening, Sarah cradled her son in her arms, watching his peaceful sleep. The battles, the tears, and the pain had not been in vain. They had emerged from darkness into a fragile light. The past would always be a part of their story, but it no longer controlled them. Together, they stepped forward, stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the future held. That was more than a story. It was a raw, unfiltered look at the price of secrets and the power of truth. If this shook you, if it stirred something deep inside, show your support by liking and subscribing. Share your thoughts, your own hidden stories or questions below, because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is face the darkness together. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart ready.